Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to know, where in the world are you watching this from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments below. I love seeing our global community come together, and if you're ready for a story that will challenge everything you think you know about starting over, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for a comeback. Let's go. Have you ever trusted the wrong person with everything you had? Have you ever made one decision that destroyed decades of careful planning? Have you ever been 55 years old and realized you have to start completely over with nothing? This is the story of Margaret Chen, a 55-year-old widow from Phoenix, Arizona, who lost her entire life savings of $347,000 to a financial scam in the summer of 2022. The money was supposed to carry her through retirement. Instead, it vanished in a single afternoon, stolen by a man she trusted, leaving her with no safety net, no backup plan, and no idea how to survive. But what happened over the next 18 months wasn't just a story of financial recovery, it was a story of complete transformation, from corporate executive to Uber driver, from victim to victor, from woman who'd lost everything to woman who discovered that what she thought was the end was actually the beginning of her most purposeful chapter yet. If you're watching this in 2026 and feeling like you're too old to start over, like your best years are behind you, like the mistakes you've made have permanently disqualified you from a good future, you need to hear Margaret's story. Because at 55, with nothing but a 12-year-old Toyota and a broken spirit, she built something more valuable than the money she lost. She built a life that mattered. Margaret Chen hadn't always been vulnerable to scams. She was smart, educated, careful. She'd worked for 32 years as a human resources director for a mid-sized tech company in Phoenix. She'd climbed the corporate ladder slowly but steadily. She'd saved diligently. She'd maxed out her retirement contributions every single year. She'd lived modestly, driven old cars, taken budget vacations. Everything she did was focused on one goal, a comfortable retirement. Her husband, Robert, had died of a heart attack 7 years earlier, in 2015. He was only 53. They'd been married 26 years, had 2 daughters, both grown and living on the East Coast with families of their own. Robert's death devastated Margaret. They'd planned to retire together, travel together, grow old together. Instead, she was alone at 48, grieving and terrified. But Margaret did what she'd always done. She kept working, she kept saving. She told herself that Robert would want her to be financially secure. His life insurance, $200,000, went straight into her retirement account. Combined with her own savings, she had $347,000 by 2022, not enough to retire luxuriously, but enough to stop working at 62 or 63 and live modestly for the rest of her life. Then she met David through her church, David Turner. He was 58, charming, a widower himself. He'd lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier. He seemed kind, genuine. They started having coffee after Sunday services, then dinners. Then he was at her house regularly and she was at his. Margaret hadn't thought she'd ever feel romantic feelings again after Robert, but David made her laugh, made her feel seen, made her feel like maybe the second half of her life didn't have to be lived alone. 6 months into their relationship, David mentioned he was a financial advisor. He worked independently, had his own clients, specialized in retirement planning. Margaret mentioned she'd been thinking about her own retirement strategy. Her money was mostly in a standard retirement account, earning modest returns. David offered to look at it. No pressure, just a professional opinion. As a friend, Margaret hesitated. Something felt off about mixing romance and finances. But David was patient. He said, "I understand if you're uncomfortable. I just want to help. I care about you. I want to make sure you're set up well." And Margaret, lonely and wanting to believe in this relationship, agreed. David reviewed her portfolio. He told her she was being too conservative. With the right investments, he could potentially double her money in 3 to 5 years. He had clients who'd seen returns of 15 to 20% annually. Margaret was skeptical. "That sounds too good to be true." David smiled. "I know it sounds aggressive, but I've been doing this for 25 years. I know what I'm doing, And I would never put your money anywhere I wouldn't put my own. Over the next month, David slowly convinced her. He showed her statements from other clients, impressive numbers showing steady growth. He explained his investment strategy in terms that sounded sophisticated and legitimate. He emphasized that her money would be in a secured account, accessible any time she wanted. Margaret's resistance eroded. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe this relationship was real, and that he genuinely cared about her future. In July of 2022, Margaret transferred $347,000 into an investment account David set up for her. He assured her the money would be invested in a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds. He'd send her quarterly statements. She could check the account balance anytime online. Everything seemed legitimate, professional, secure. For the first month, everything was fine. David showed her the account growing, up 3%, up 5%. Margaret felt relief. Maybe this was going to work. Maybe she'd made the right decision trusting him. Then, in late August, David stopped returning her calls. At first, Margaret thought he was just busy, but days passed. Then a week. She went to his house. No one answered. She called his office number. Disconnected. She tried to log into her investment account online. The website didn't exist anymore. Panic set in. She went to his church. No one had seen him. She called the phone number on the documents he'd given her. Out of service. Margaret went to the police, filed a report. The detective assigned to her case was sympathetic but realistic. "Ma'am, I'm going to be honest with you. These cases are extremely difficult to prosecute. The money's probably gone, moved through multiple accounts, possibly offshore. The man you knew as David Turner might not even be his real name. We'll investigate, but I need you to prepare for the possibility that you won't get your money back." Margaret sat in that police station and felt her entire world collapse. $347,000 gone. 32 years of disciplined saving, Robert's life insurance, her entire retirement, stolen by a man she'd trusted, a man she'd been falling in love with. The humiliation was almost worse than the financial loss. How could she have been so stupid, so naive? Everyone always said if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Why hadn't she listened? She drove home in a daze, sat in her living room and stared at the wall for hours. She was 55 years old. She had $43,000 left in her regular checking account. That was it. That was all that stood between her and complete financial ruin. Her salary covered her bills with a little left over, but she'd planned to work only 7 more years. Now what? Work until she was 70, 75? What if she got sick? What if she couldn't work? She had no safety net, no backup plan, no husband to help carry the load. She was completely, utterly alone. The next few weeks were a blur. Margaret went through the motions at work, but couldn't focus. She'd wake up at 3 a.m. in a panic, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. She stopped going to church, too ashamed to face people who might have seen her with David. She stopped calling her daughters, afraid they'd ask questions she didn't want to answer. She withdrew into herself, spiraling into depression and shame. By October, Margaret knew she couldn't keep going like this. She had to tell someone. She called her older daughter, Jessica. "Mom, what's wrong?" "I can hear it in your voice." Margaret broke down, told her everything, the relationship, the investment, the scam, the lost money. Jessica was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Mom, why didn't you talk to us first? Why didn't you ask someone before transferring that much money?" Margaret couldn't answer, because she'd wanted to believe, because she'd been lonely, because she'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. Jessica flew out from Boston the following week, sat with Margaret, helped her think through her options. The reality was brutal. Margaret was making $68,000 a year, after taxes, about $50,000. Her mortgage was $1,500 a month, utilities $200, food $400, car insurance, gas, phone, internet, another $500. That left about $1,400 a month. Not nothing, but not nearly enough to rebuild $300,000 in retirement savings while also trying to live. Jessica suggested Margaret sell the house. It was worth about $280,000, with $150,000 still owed on the mortgage. If she sold it, She'd net about $120,000 after fees and paying off the mortgage. She could rent something smaller, cheaper, and bank the difference. Margaret hated the idea. This was the house she'd shared with Robert, where she'd raised her daughters. It held 30 years of memories, but Jessica was gentle but firm. "Mom, you can't afford sentiment. You need to be practical. This house is costing you $1,800 a month between mortgage and utilities. You could rent a one-bedroom apartment for $900. That saves you $900 a month. That's $10,000 a year you could put toward rebuilding your retirement." Margaret knew Jessica was right, but the thought of leaving this house felt like losing Robert all over again. Still, she didn't have a choice. In November, she listed the house. It sold in 3 weeks. By mid-December, Margaret had moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood. The apartment was fine, clean, safe, but it wasn't home. It was a concrete reminder of everything she'd lost. The house sale netted her $115,000 after all expenses. She put it in a high-yield savings account. At current rates, it would earn maybe $4,000 a year in interest. Not much, but something. Combined with her salary, she was surviving, but barely. And the psychological weight of what had happened was crushing her. Margaret made it through Christmas, but just barely. Her daughters invited her to come east to spend the holidays with them, but Margaret declined. She couldn't face their pity. She couldn't pretend to be festive when she felt like her life was over. She spent Christmas Day alone in her new apartment, eating Chinese takeout and crying. On New Year's Eve 2022, Margaret sat in that apartment and took stock. She was 55. She had $115,000 in savings, which sounds like a lot until you realize it needs to last potentially 30 years. She was still working, but for how long? Her company had been doing layoffs. She'd survived the last round, but there was no guarantee. If she lost her job, what then? She'd have to find something else. And who wants to hire a 55-year-old HR director when they can hire someone younger for less money? Margaret felt like she was standing on a cliff edge, one strong wind away from falling off. She thought about Robert, wondered what he would tell her to do. She thought about her daughters, felt ashamed that she'd been so foolish. She thought about David, whoever he really was, felt rage and humiliation that he'd played her so thoroughly, and she thought about herself. Who was she now? A victim, a fool, a cautionary tale? She didn't know, but she knew she couldn't keep living like this. The depression was eating her alive. She needed help. In January 2023, Margaret did something she'd never done before. She went to a therapist, Dr. Sandra Williams, a woman in her 60s who specialized in trauma and grief. The first session, Margaret just cried, told the whole story. The loneliness after Robert died, meeting David, the relationship, the scam, the lost money, the shame. Dr. Williams listened without judgment. Then she said something that stuck with Margaret. "You're grieving multiple losses at once. Your money, yes, but also your trust, your sense of safety, your identity as someone who makes good decisions, and your fantasy of what your retirement would look like. All of that is gone. You need to grieve it before you can move forward." Over the next few months, Margaret went to therapy every week. Slowly, she started processing what had happened. Dr. Williams helped her see that she wasn't stupid or naive. She'd been targeted by a professional con artist who exploited her loneliness and vulnerability. That didn't make the loss less painful, but it made it less about Margaret's worth as a person. She'd made a mistake, a big one, but it didn't define her. She could still have a future. It just looked different than she'd planned. By March 2023, Margaret was functioning better, working, sleeping, eating regular meals. But she was still stuck financially. Her salary barely covered her reduced expenses. She wasn't saving anything, and every time she looked at her bank account, seeing $115,000 instead of $347,000, she felt sick. One evening after work, Margaret was venting to her younger daughter, Emily, on the phone. "I just don't know how I'm going to make this work, Mom. I'm treading water, not making progress." Emily said, "Have you thought about a side job?" "Mom, I know it's not ideal, but what if you did something a few nights a week for extra income?" Margaret bristled. I'm 55 years old. I work full-time. I'm exhausted by the end of the day. I can't imagine adding another job. Emily was gentle. I know, Mom. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm just saying, what's the alternative? Keep barely surviving or find a way to get ahead. Margaret thought about it. Emily was right. She needed more income. But what could she do? She wasn't qualified for much outside of HR, and she couldn't work another full-time corporate job. She needed something flexible, something she could do on her own schedule. After some research, she landed on ride-sharing, Uber, Lyft. She could drive evenings and weekends, set her own hours, use her own car. A 12-year-old Toyota Camry that was reliable but nothing special. The money wouldn't be amazing, but it would be something, extra income to rebuild her savings faster. In April 2023, Margaret signed up to drive for Uber. The orientation process was straightforward. Background check, car inspection, download the app. And suddenly, she was an Uber driver. A 55-year-old former HR executive driving strangers around Phoenix for $15 an hour after Uber's cut. The humiliation stung, but Margaret pushed through it. She needed the money more than she needed her pride. Her first night driving, Margaret was terrified. What if she got lost? What if passengers were rude? What if something dangerous happened? But she forced herself to turn on the app. Her first ride request came within minutes. A young man going from a restaurant to his apartment. He got in, said hello, then spent the whole ride on his phone. No conversation. At the end, he gave her a 5-star rating and a $2 tip. Margaret exhaled. Okay, that wasn't so bad. Over the next few weeks, Margaret developed a rhythm. She'd work her corporate job during the day, come home, eat a quick dinner, then drive from 7 p.m. until midnight, 5 nights a week, plus Saturday afternoons and Sunday evenings. She was exhausted, constantly tired. Her body ached from sitting in the car for hours, but she was making between $800 and $1,000 a week from Uber. After gas and car maintenance, she was netting about $600 to $700 extra per week. That was close to $3,000 a month. Real money. Money she could save. By June, Margaret had a system. She knew the best times to drive for maximum fares. She knew which neighborhoods tipped well and which didn't. She kept mints and phone chargers in her car for passengers. She learned to make small talk without being intrusive, and slowly, unexpectedly, she started to enjoy aspects of it. The independence, the variety, the people. Margaret's passengers were a cross-section of humanity. College students heading to parties, business travelers going to hotels, parents with kids going to soccer practice, elderly people going to doctor appointments. Each person had a story. Most didn't share it, but some did. And Margaret, with her HR background and natural empathy, was a good listener. One night in July, she picked up a woman named Alicia from a hospital. Alicia got in the back seat crying. Margaret asked if she was okay. Alicia apologized. I'm sorry. I just got bad news. My mom's cancer came back. They're saying maybe 6 months. I don't know how I'm going to handle this. Margaret pulled over in a parking lot and turned around. I'm so sorry. That's devastating. Do you want to talk about it? For the next 20 minutes, Alicia poured out her heart. Margaret just listened, offered tissues, shared that she'd lost her husband unexpectedly, and understood the terror of anticipating loss. When they finally arrived at Alicia's destination, Alicia gave Margaret a hug. Thank you. You have no idea how much I needed that. I was going to drive myself home, but I was too upset. You were exactly what I needed tonight. God sent you. Margaret drove away from that ride with tears in her eyes. For the first time since the scam, she felt like she'd made a difference, like she had something to offer beyond just transportation. That night planted a seed. What if this wasn't just a side job to make money? What if it could be something more? What if her car could become a mobile ministry? If you're still watching, hit that like button if this story is resonating with you, and drop a comment telling me about a time when you thought your life was over, but God had other plans. Let's encourage each other. Over the next few months, Margaret became more intentional about her Uber driving. She started each shift with a prayer. God, let me be a blessing to whoever gets in this car today. Use me however you want. She kept her car spotlessly clean. She played soft, neutral music. She had water bottles available, and she paid attention, really paid attention to her passengers' emotional states. She picked up a young man named Carlos who'd just been fired from his job. He was devastated, angry, convinced his life was ruined. Margaret shared her own story of losing everything at 55. Carlos was shocked. You lost more than I've ever had, and you're still going. How? Margaret said simply, one day at a time. One decision at a time. The pain doesn't disappear, but you learn to carry it. And eventually, you realize you're stronger than you thought. She picked up an elderly man named Frank, going to a nursing home to visit his wife with Alzheimer's. He was quiet, sad. Margaret asked about his wife. Frank's face lit up as he talked about their 62 years of marriage. Even though she doesn't remember me anymore, I still go every day. Because I remember for both of us. Margaret was moved to tears, Frank noticed. Are you okay, dear? Margaret smiled. Yes. You just reminded me what real love looks like. Thank you. She picked up a teenage girl named Sophia, who'd been kicked out by her parents for being gay. Sophia was going to a friend's house, scared and heartbroken. Margaret told her, I don't know your whole story, but I know you deserve to be loved, and you will find your people. The family that chooses you is sometimes stronger than the family you're born into. Sophia cried and thanked her. Ride after ride, Margaret found herself in these sacred moments. People sharing their deepest pain with a stranger, because sometimes that's easier than sharing with someone who knows you. And Margaret, who'd spent years in HR helping people navigate difficult situations, was uniquely equipped for these conversations. Her car became a confessional, a counseling office, a safe space. And Margaret discovered that helping others helped heal her own wounds. By October 2023, Margaret had been driving for 6 months. She'd saved $18,000 from her Uber income. Combined with her salary savings, she'd added $24,000 to her retirement account. She was making progress, not as fast as she'd hoped, but real progress. More importantly, she'd found purpose. She wasn't just driving people around. She was being present for them in their moments of need. One night in November, Margaret picked up a woman named Rachel from a hotel. Rachel got in, gave an address across town, and immediately started sobbing. Margaret didn't say anything at first, just drove and let Rachel cry. After a few minutes, Rachel apologized. I'm so sorry. I'm a mess, Margaret said gently. You're not a mess. You're human. Do you want to talk about it? Rachel's story poured out. She was 49. Her husband had just told her he wanted a divorce after 26 years. He'd been having an affair with a co-worker. Rachel had no idea. She thought their marriage was fine, solid. Now her whole life was falling apart. She didn't know who she was without him. She was terrified of being alone. She felt like her life was ending. Margaret pulled the car over again, turned around to face Rachel. Your life is not ending. I know it feels that way, but it's not. She then shared her own story, all of it. Robert's death, David's scam, losing everything at 55, having to start completely over. Rachel listened, stunned. You lost that much money, and you're driving Uber. Margaret nodded. Yes, and I'm okay. I'm actually more than okay. I've discovered that my value isn't in my bank account or my job title or my marital status. It's in who I am, in how I show up for people, in the difference I make. You'll discover that too, not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I don't think it's an accident that you were my driver tonight. I don't think this is random. I think God knew I needed to hear your story. Margaret smiled. I think you're right. When they arrived at Rachel's sister's house, Rachel hugged Margaret and asked for her number. Margaret gave it to her. They stayed in touch. Rachel later told Margaret that their conversation that night saved her life. She'd been planning to end it. Couldn't see a way forward. But hearing Margaret's story gave her hope that maybe she could survive this. That conversation changed something in Margaret. She realized that her scam, her loss, her humiliation, All of it had given her a message that others needed to hear. She wasn't just a victim, she was a survivor. And her survival was giving other people permission to survive too. In December 2023, Margaret made a decision. She was going to turn this into something bigger. She started a blog called The Uber Confessional. She wrote about her passengers' stories, changing names and details to protect privacy, but sharing the lessons she was learning, about resilience, about starting over, about finding purpose in unexpected places. The blog was simple, nothing fancy, but it resonated. People started reading, sharing, commenting with their own stories. By February 2024, the blog had 1,000 regular readers. Margaret started getting emails from people all over the country. "Your story gives me hope. I lost my job at 62 and thought my life was over. But you're showing me it's possible to rebuild." Other emails said, "I'm going through a divorce and feel worthless. But reading about how you're helping people from your Uber car reminds me that my value isn't in my marriage. It's in me." Margaret was stunned. She'd started the blog just to process her own experience. She had no idea it would touch others so deeply. In March, a local news station reached out. They wanted to do a story on the Uber driver who's changing lives. Margaret was hesitant. She didn't want attention, but she agreed, thinking maybe it would help more people. The segment aired in early April 2024. It was only 4 minutes, but it went viral locally. Margaret's phone exploded with ride requests from people who specifically wanted her as their driver, people who were going through hard times and needed someone to talk to. Her Uber rating skyrocketed. She became one of the most requested drivers in Phoenix, but more importantly, opportunities started coming. A local church asked her to speak at their women's retreat about resilience and starting over. Margaret had never spoken publicly before, but she agreed. She told her story honestly, the scam, the shame, the financial devastation, the decision to drive Uber. The passengers who became her ministry, the women in that room wept. Many came up afterward to thank her, to share their own stories of loss and rebuilding. More speaking invitations followed. Churches, community groups, financial literacy organizations. Margaret discovered she was good at this, at being vulnerable, at making people feel less alone, at showing that it's never too late to start over. By June 2024, Margaret had saved $48,000 from her Uber income over 14 months. Combined with the interest from her house sale money, she now had $168,000. She was still far from the $347,000 she'd lost, but she was making real progress. More importantly, she was different, stronger, more grounded, more purposeful. In July, a publisher contacted her. They'd seen her blog and her local news story. They wanted her to write a book, her story, the scam, the recovery, the lessons learned, the passengers, the unexpected ministry. Margaret was shocked. "I'm not a writer." The publisher laughed. "You've been writing your blog for 8 months. You're absolutely a writer. Write like you blog, just be honest, that's what people need." Margaret spent the next 6 months writing. She'd work her day job, drive Uber in the evenings, and write late at night. It was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. She was creating something, leaving something behind, turning her worst experience into something that could help others avoid the same fate or survive if they'd already fallen into it. The book, titled Uber Confessional, Finding Purpose in the Passenger Seat, released in March of 2025. Margaret had no expectations. She figured maybe a few thousand people would read it. Instead, it hit regional bestseller lists, then national ones. People were hungry for stories of real people, overcoming real problems without pretending it was easy. By December 2024, 2.5 years after the scam, Margaret Chen sat in her small apartment on New Year's Eve and reflected on her journey. She'd lost $347,000, but she'd gained something more valuable: purpose, peace, a message that mattered. She was still driving Uber, still working her corporate job, still living in a modest apartment. But she was content. She'd rebuilt $183,000 in savings. She'd helped countless passengers through difficult moments. She'd spoken to thousands of women about resilience. She'd written a book that was changing lives. Margaret pulled out her journal and wrote something powerful. 2.5 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought losing my money meant losing my future. I was wrong. The scam didn't end my life. It redirected it. I thought I was going to retire and travel and relax. God had different plans. He needed me in an Uber car at midnight talking to a suicidal woman. He needed me writing a blog that would give hope to strangers. He needed me speaking to rooms full of people who felt like failures. I couldn't have done any of that from a comfortable retirement. I needed to be broken first. I needed to lose everything so I could discover that my value was never in what I had. It was in who I am and what I give. As midnight approached, Margaret thought about David, the man who'd stolen her money. She'd spent the first year hating him, wishing him harm, obsessing over revenge. But therapy and time had softened that. She didn't forgive him exactly. What he did was unconscionable, but she'd released the need for revenge. Because holding on to that hatred was only hurting her. He'd already taken her money. She wasn't going to let him take her peace too. The clock struck midnight, 2025. A new year. Margaret felt hopeful, not because her circumstances were perfect. They weren't. She was still 57 years old, still working 2 jobs, still driving strangers around Phoenix at night. But she was okay with that, because she'd discovered that the best years of your life aren't necessarily the ones where everything goes according to plan. Sometimes, the best years are the ones where everything falls apart and you discover you're strong enough to rebuild. Margaret's story teaches us 7 crucial lessons that can transform how we handle devastating loss and unexpected setbacks. First, it's never too late to start over. Margaret was 55 when she lost everything. Society tells us that's too old, that your productive years are behind you, that you should just accept defeat. Margaret proved that's a lie. Starting over at 55, 60 and 70 is hard, but it's possible. And sometimes, starting over gives you opportunities you never would have had if life had gone according to plan. Second, your worst moment can become your greatest message. Margaret's scam was humiliating, devastating, but it gave her a story that resonated with millions of people who'd also been scammed, betrayed, or fooled. Your mess becomes your message when you're willing to be honest about it. Stop hiding your failures. They might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to know they're not alone. Third, purpose can be found in unexpected places. Margaret thought purpose would come from a high-level corporate career and a comfortable retirement. Instead, she found it in the passenger seat of her Uber car. Purpose isn't about the prestige of what you do. It's about showing up authentically wherever you are and being present for the people in front of you. Fourth, helping others heals you. Margaret didn't drive Uber thinking it would be therapeutic. She did it for money. But the act of helping her passengers through their struggles helped her process her own. When you're drowning in your own pain, sometimes the best thing you can do is help someone else with theirs. It gives you perspective. It reminds you that you're not alone in suffering, and it gives you purpose beyond your own problems. Fifth, your value isn't in your bank account. Margaret thought losing her retirement money meant losing her future, but she discovered that her value was never in how much she'd saved. It was in who she was and how she showed up for people. Money matters. Financial security matters, but it's not everything. Your worth as a human being isn't determined by your net worth. Sixth, community is everything. Margaret couldn't have survived without her daughters, her therapist, and eventually her blog readers and speaking audiences. When you're going through hell, you need people who will sit with you in it, who won't judge you, who won't tell you to just get over it, who will simply be present. Find those people. Be that person for others. Seventh, forgiveness is for you, not them. Margaret releasing her hatred of David didn't help David. He was long gone, but it helped her. Unforgiveness is like carrying a backpack full of rocks. It only weighs you down. The person who wronged you isn't carrying those rocks. You are. Put them down. Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve freedom. Now I want to speak directly to you. Maybe you've been scammed like Margaret. Maybe you've lost money to a bad investment, a dishonest partner, a financial crisis. Maybe you're older and feeling like it's too late to rebuild. Maybe you're working a job you feel is beneath you and wondering if this is all there is. I need you to hear this. Your story isn't over. This chapter is hard, brutally hard, but it's not the final chapter. Margaret, at 55 with nothing, thought her life was finished. She was wrong. Her most impactful years were just beginning. Yours might be too. The question isn't whether you'll face devastating losses. If you live long enough, you will. The question is, what will you do with them? Will you let them define you, or will you let them refine you? Here's what I need you to do first. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Hit that subscribe button. Join our community of people who believe it's never too late for a comeback. Second, share this video. You know someone who needs to hear Margaret's story. Someone who's lost money. Someone who feels too old to start over. Someone who's working a job they're embarrassed about. Send them this link. It might change their life. Third, leave a comment. Tell me where you are in your journey. Are you in your scam moment? Your Uber driving moment? Your book writing moment? Or your looking back grateful moment? Share your story. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to keep going. Margaret's turnaround didn't happen overnight. It took 2.5 years of grinding, of working 2 jobs, of choosing to show up every day even when she was exhausted, of believing that better days were possible even when she couldn't see them yet. That's what resilience looks like, not bouncing back instantly, but getting up one more time than you fall down, showing up one more day, taking one more step forward even when you want to quit. Your Uber moment, whatever that looks like for you, might be your training ground for your greatest impact. The job you hate might be where you meet the person who changes your trajectory. The financial loss you're enduring might be the story that helps millions of others avoid the same fate. The age you think disqualifies you might actually be the exact experience that qualifies you for your real calling. Margaret is 59 now as we enter 2026. She's still driving Uber a few nights a week, not because she has to anymore, but because she wants to, because those rides matter, those conversations matter. She's rebuilt $215,000 in retirement savings. Her book continues to sell. She speaks regularly. She's launched a non-profit helping scam victims navigate recovery. And she's engaged to a man named Thomas she met, ironically, through her speaking circuit. He's a widower who heard her speak at his church and was moved by her honesty about loss and rebuilding. Margaret's life didn't turn out the way she planned. It turned out better, not easier, not without scars, but better, because she had to dig deeper than she ever thought possible. She had to discover strength she didn't know she had. She had to learn that her value wasn't in what she accumulated, but in what she gave away. And that lesson, that transformation, was worth more than the money she lost. If you're watching this and you're in your darkest financial moment right now, hear this. The money you lost, the opportunities that disappeared, the plans that fell apart, they hurt. They're real losses that deserve to be grieved. But they're not the end of your story. They might actually be the beginning of your best chapter, if you're willing to stay open to what God might be doing. Margaret thought retirement at 62 was her finish line. God had a different race in mind, one that required her to be stripped down to nothing so she could be rebuilt as something stronger, one that required her to sit with strangers in vulnerable moments, one that required her to turn her shame into a testimony. She couldn't have run that race from a comfortable retirement. She needed to be in the trenches first. Your trenches right now, whatever they are, they're not punishment, they're preparation. The job that feels beneath you might be exactly where you need to be to meet the person who needs your story. The financial crisis that's crushing you might be the platform for your greatest ministry. The age you think disqualifies you might be the exact qualification for what's coming next. So stop waiting for perfect circumstances to start living with purpose. Stop thinking you need to have it all together before you can make a difference. Margaret made a difference from the driver's seat of a 12-year-old Toyota. You can make a difference right where you are, right now, today, with what you have, with who you are, even if you're broken, especially if you're broken. Because broken people understand pain in a way comfortable people never will, and the world needs people who understand pain. Before we close, let me pray for you. Wherever you are, whatever you're facing, receive this. Father God, I pray for every person watching who feels like Margaret felt, who's lost money they can't afford to lose, who's been betrayed by someone they trusted, who's working a job that feels humiliating, who's wondering if they're too old to start over. Meet them right where they are. Show them that this isn't the end. Give them strength for today, hope for tomorrow, and the courage to believe that you can use even this, even their worst moment, for something beautiful. Remind them that their value isn't in what they've lost, but in who they are in you, and help them take the next step, whatever that step is, in Jesus' name. Amen. Margaret's journey from scam victim to purpose-driven driver to published author to non-profit founder proves that it's never too late. That loss isn't final. That your worst day can birth your best mission. She didn't just survive her scam. She transformed it into something that's helping thousands of others survive theirs. Your transformation is waiting, not someday. Now, in the job you have, in the circumstances you're in the brokenness you're carrying. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop waiting to feel ready. Start now. Show up. Do the next right thing. Help the person in front of you. Tell your story honestly. And watch what God does with your willingness. The passenger seat of your life, and wherever that is your mission field. The people you encounter daily need what you have to offer. Not perfection, not having it all together, but authenticity, empathy, hope forged in fire. That's what changes lives. That's what changed Margaret's passengers' lives. That's what can change someone's life through you today. So get in the driver's seat. Turn on your metaphorical app. Show up for whoever God brings your way. And trust that He's writing a story through your life that's bigger and better than anything you could have planned. Margaret's story is proof. Your story can be too. The scam that nearly destroyed Margaret at 55 became the platform for her most significant work at 57. The years you think are wasted might be the years that matter most. Don't give up. Don't quit. Don't let loss have the last word. Because if Margaret can rebuild at 55 with nothing, you can rebuild wherever you are with whatever you have. Your comeback is coming. Your purpose is waiting. Your best chapter hasn't been written yet. It's time to start writing it. Not someday, today, right now, this moment. You've got this. And more importantly, God's got you. He hasn't forgotten you. He hasn't abandoned you. He's positioning you, preparing you, getting you ready for something you can't see yet, but He's been planning all along. Margaret would tell you, don't waste your scam. Don't waste your loss. Don't waste your pain. Let it become your message. Let it qualify you for the ministry only you can do. Let it transform you into someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate than you were before. Because that's what loss does when you let God use it. It doesn't just destroy, it refines. It doesn't just take away. It reveals what was there all along under all the stuff you thought defined you. You are not your bank account. You are not your job title. You are not your age. You are not your losses. You're a child of God with a purpose that transcends all of that. And that purpose is waiting for you to step into it. So take the first step, then the next, then the next. And before you know it, you'll look back and realize the valley you thought would kill you actually made you. That's Margaret's testimony. Let it be yours too. The best is yet to come. Believe it, live it, become it. Verse for your meditation. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to His purpose. Romans 8:28.